Thank you, sirs. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the much anticipated panel discussion. We are living in an era of rapid transformation. Technology, AI, automation, remote and hybrid work, evolving skill demands, and shifting workplace culture. So, what does the future hold? What are the challenges and what are the opportunities? We have assembled a stellar panel to answer these pressing questions. Dr. Rathin Roy is a distinguished professor at Kautilya School of Public Policy and visiting senior fellow at ODI London. His Economic Times column, public lectures, and media appearances on macroeconomics and political economy are widely followed by Indians around the world. Mr. Ajay Bisaria, Corporate Strategic Advisor and Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, India's premier private sector think tank. Mr. Anurag Mathur is a partner with Bain & Co. He has a wide gamut of consulting experience on business and organizational transformation across consumer goods and retail industry across India, Middle East, and the Americas. We also have with us Ms. Sumita Kareer, currently the Deputy Editor and Anchor at ET Now. She covers technology, policy, foreign affairs, and related sectors. Now, I let Ms. Kareer to commence the discussion. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone, for gathering here. And we had a stellar lineup of speakers from, of course, the faculty of FMS and, of course, others who have given really pearls of wisdom on what the future of work really looks like, and of course from their own experiences on what the future of work really looked like back then and now. Let me quote some numbers here. According to the WEF's Future of Jobs Report 2030, the job market is poised for a significant transformation. There are going to be numerous jobs that will face disruption. There's going to be creation of jobs as well, 170 million new roles, displacement of 92 million existing roles. And of course, driving these changes are a whole host of factors. There are geopolitical developments happening, technological revolution that's happening. The job market, as it is also undergoing digital transformation. There is inflation and several other factors. So we'll be delving deeper into all of these factors so that you, when you step out in the job market, can be really in the driver's seat. I had this quandary, and I had to decide this a couple of years back. So thankfully, I'm out of that role, but I do hope that this panel discussion will give you insights into how the future of work will really shape up over the next couple of years. So let me first, on that note, begin with Dr. Roy. We have actually spoken about, and we were speaking about earlier as well, the kind of geopolitical developments that are happening, technological revolution that's happening. Digital is at the center of everything, and that wasn't something that we saw a couple of years back. In fact, if you talk about ChatGPT and OpenAI, that came into the picture in 2023, and ever since then, we've seen big tech platforms and, of course, big billionaires and businessmen like Elon Musk, Bill Gates speak about the fact that they will displace jobs. I want to understand from you, is there a realistic worry about jobs getting displaced due to AI? If you could put that into perspective for all of us here.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you, FMS, for inviting me. I have always, I was telling my colleague that the reputation of FMS as an institution globally, wherever I've worked, there's one word we use in Bombay, that's a solid place. And I think that's a great compliment to any institution. So it's a delight to be here. Though I must point out somewhat mischievously that your founder, Professor A.K. Das Gupta, was an economist. Uh, Now, and I also want to sort of acknowledge Dr. S.P. Gupta. It's quite amazing. I just told Ambassador Bisaria that, remember the statistics book we did in college? And I finished college in '86. He wrote it. And that book has endured now for 33 years. And I don't think all my later learnings, basically a concept as simple as important in today's debate, which is pertinent, which is, does the tax cut affect people earning the median income or the per capita income? If you haven't read that book, you won't get it from a statistics book. So it was wonderful that you called him today. Let me turn to your question now. There are many angles of attack to the question of jobs and displacement. Let me start by asking the audience a question, not the first few rows, some of the students perhaps. What's a Luddite? Someone? Yes, please. Exactly. And that word was from when? 1757 at least, from the Industrial Revolution. And I have seen Luddites operate across my lifetime, and people who were born before me have seen them operate. I remember when there was a huge fuss created in the 1980s when the banking sector, State Bank of India, tried to introduce computers. And we know that computers increase jobs. They did not reduce jobs in the end, but people were scared, and people get scared because, it happens even at my level. The Delhi School of Economics did not change its economics course for 30 years because the lecturers didn't want to learn new stuff. Why would a lecturer want to learn new stuff? Permanent naukri hai kya hai mujhe? So getting people outside their comfort zones is always accompanied by what I would call noise regarding opportunity, etc. So there is this noise, but let me make 3 headline points to initiate the discussion. One, we are facing, irrespective of AI and ChatGPT, we are facing across the world a phenomenon which I never thought I would see in my lifetime. And it depresses me particularly because we are seeing it in my country, which is a very poor, it is, I'm afraid, developing country. Which is that, you see, when my grandfather moved to Bombay from what is now Bangladesh, he fully expected to be more prosperous than my great-grandfather. I'm talking about men because women didn't enter the workforce with my mother. My father expected to be more prosperous than my grandfather, and he was. And I am way more prosperous than my father, and my child is probably likely to be more prosperous than me, hopefully. I want a peaceful old age. This is not going to be true, whether it's the US or India, or India, which is sad, or Japan, of the generation that is coming into the job market, sorry folks, since about 2016, 27, unless Papa and Mummy have given you what we call in India, virasat. If Papa has left you a house or Papa has left you a bank balance, you're cool. But if you don't have that, if you're entering like Mr. Agarwal did, with nothing in his pocket to build something, the research shows globally that the probability is about the same. 80% of people across income classes will lead lives less prosperous than their parents. This should not happen. And this is going to happen whether ChatGPT happens or not. The second fact I want to tell you in India, since I like to speak about Indians, and I don't like to speak about Indians who earn 6 times the per capita income as the income tax cut, which is what the income tax cut is all about. 80% of India lives on less than $5 a day. Are you seriously telling me that their livelihoods are going to be affected by ChatGPT and AI? Perhaps positively, it might connect people in remote Bihar with locations and opportunities in South India, or even better, Dubai. Who wants to work in South India when you can work in Dubai? Or even better, the United States. There's a whole hierarchy of places you like to work, and South India's at the bottom for this poor chap from Bihar. That might happen. But otherwise, what impact will it have? So really, when you're asking this question, you're asking questions about PLUs, people like us, and what it is going to do to us. What it is going to do to us, the third, and what is going to do to jobs for people like us, that's a question in common that we can ask across all categories of people. I've always wondered about this. The only place you can create jobs is in Bharat Sarkar. You can't create a job. Activities create jobs. So the question you have to ask is, if there aren't enough jobs for people, what, and you got an answer from the keynote speaker 10 minutes ago, he said something, and I was telling my colleagues, I wish the people I work for, my clients, my customers, my other industrialists, would take on this simple lesson. He said something so simple and so important. Activities create jobs, and if you're not creating enough jobs in this country, it means we are not engaged in the activities that would generate these jobs. And what he said was, look for places where we are importing stuff and make it. This is very simple and it's very important. But he's the only entrepreneur I've heard in the last 20 years who said that. Look at what we're importing and try and make what we're importing. Those are activities that at the moment are creating jobs elsewhere. They will create jobs here if you do them. So we can proceed on this, but my answer to this is, let us find activities that will create jobs and then ask all these fancy questions about AI and ChatGPT when we have discussed what activities in India create jobs. Because it's quite certain that the activities we are doing now are not creating jobs. It is also certain that we are moving into a period where our children and the children after them will be less prosperous than us. And this is a global phenomenon. And we are also at grave risk in this country of, as elites, of gating ourselves from the 80% of the people who live very unprosperously because they do not have jobs. So I think that would be my context.
Absolutely. And Dr. Roy, when we were talking earlier, you also mentioned there are about 100 million people who actually don't want any jobs because they are hopeless. So that is the situation that we are currently facing. So you've spoken about the economic realities. There is, of course, an increasing cost of living also that's impacting this situation and worsening it. But let me talk to Mr. Bisaria on the geopolitical impact of these things, because we are seeing governments turning increasingly protectionist. Now, there is a kind of feeling that governments are closing in. There are immigration policies that the Trump administration is undertaking. We've also seen that kind of voice coming in from Canada as well, and of course some countries from Europe. Help us understand how that is going to impact job creation and ultimately, where jobs are concentrated in the future.
Thank you. Am I audible? Is this working? Yes, it is. Okay, so before I go on, thank you very much, FMS, for inviting us, for being here. And listening to what Mr. Agarwal said, let me just make one comment on that. On the future of work, I couldn't help noting that, perhaps what the future of work should look like is like the past of work. Is like what he's talking about. If you see the budget that was released on the 1st of February, what it was encouraging or talking about is private sector-led manufacturing, labor-intensive growth with supply chains that are in India and, make in India, make for the world. That is their ambition, that if we can export. So, really speaking, while we are talking of disruptive forces like AI and so on, but perhaps from India's point of view, in a policy sense, we need to be going back to the past of work to look at the future of work. And if a bunch of students here draw inspiration from this story and get into sectors like this, I think that's what the Indian economy is demanding. But, to look at the wider global picture, economists will tell you that factor mobility, labor and capital moving globally is central to globalization, central to, economic progress and so on. But what we are seeing now is an inflection point. It's in a sense a grand correction. So both the forces are at play. The protectionist forces, which we saw at play in the US elections, Trump was elected on a protectionist platform. We saw, relevant to India, a conversation in the US in December about the H-1B visas, where they said that, while the base or the MAGA base was arguing that we don't need even these skilled Indians into the United States, the tech so-called broligarchs, they made the point that, look, we need these guys to run our big tech companies. And they finally won the argument, but that was an argument that took place. And certainly, from India's point of view, since we're the third largest exporter of undocumented illegal immigrants to the United States, that part of the story is we will have to accept them back. So a reverse labor mobility is going to take place. But also a question mark on labor mobility in general. The other phenomenon we are seeing globally is a replication of what we saw in the United States, we're seeing in Europe as well. Because in Europe, recently a few right-wing governments, leaders got together in Spain and talked about MEGA, Make Europe Great Again. And that exactly has anti-immigration. It also has some ultra-nationalist Nazi elements in it, but anti-immigration thought is very central to that. So there is a protectionist sentiment in much of the world, in much of the Western world. Even now, Germany is going into elections next week, and there is a 20% support to a completely anti-immigration AfD right-wing party. And even the CDU, with the possible winner of the election, Mr. Merz, is trying to get onto a position which is center-right. So all of global politics is shifting from center to center-right and perhaps even to the far right. But what we need to also recognize that these countries face a contradiction. Because on the one hand, they don't like immigrants, but they also love their lifestyle. So they want growth, they want skilled immigrants coming in, they want to run those welfare states, and they have declining populations. So they do need these immigrants. So I think what we're seeing is a correction, but both these forces will operate together, and we will possibly find an equilibrium.
So Mr. Bisaria, when you talk of this correction, is this going to be a short-term correction? Is this going to, normalize after a couple of years?
Well, my guess would be that overall we are seeing a shift to the right. And, I would argue that Trump is not the aberration. Biden was the aberration. But
yes.
US politics has moved rightward. That's why you had Trump 1.1, Trump 2.0. And you will have a more rightward shift in politics in general. But I think on mobility of labor and on mobility of workers, there would be a correction. It wouldn't be a zero immigration policy, but it would be some kind of correction, of the H-1B kind that the Americans had
right.
Invented and which American business has really enjoyed. So, for young people here who are going to go for the next 3 decades into global businesses, they will be traveling abroad, there will be mobility, but they would face a much more disruptive world, with geopolitics itself being a huge disruption, apart from technology. And while we are riding on the demographic dividend, we face these headwinds of geopolitics. Absolutely. And we face the headwinds of
Absolutely.
technology.
And skilling in itself is a huge challenge, because when we talk about capitalizing on this opportunity that India currently has, because we talk of a 6.5% to 7% growth, which the government says that it is, of course, more than what other countries in the world are clocking. So this is going to be key, but we'll come to that point in just a little bit. Let me come to you, Anurag, and get a perspective on, what companies are really thinking of these, geopolitical changes, technological changes, and how are they bracing for how they're going to hire youngsters?
So I think fundamentally companies, and I agree with both analysts here, I think the shifts are definitely happening. But I think, as Troy said, if you track back from the Industrial Revolution to today, pretty much you can say every decade there is 10% of jobs that become redundant, right? There is no, it will happen, it has happened, it will continue to happen. But that is not something to comfort ourselves with, because one, fundamentally we see with generative AI, there is a shift that is probably larger from a technology standpoint that is expected. And two, like he also mentioned, we are bothered about people like us, right? And as most of the folks sitting in this room, you're already entering the economy as top talent, right? And you're really thinking about saying that as top talent, how do we make ourselves more prosperous rather than whether we have a job or not, right? And fundamentally, the shift from a competitive, from a company or business standpoint, companies are really thinking, how do we take advantage of the geopolitical shifts as well as the technological shifts to retain or improve competitive advantage? Because the biggest challenge that I would say that the large incumbent companies today are facing is that on one side, the changes of technology are benefiting business in significant ways, but those benefits are being reaped by what we call scale insurgents or insurgents, right? The innovations are not coming from the large incumbents, they're coming from the insurgents. And why that is happening is because, and Bain, sort of, we believe that we have entered what we call the era of the scale insurgent, which is that only scale does not matter. Speed plus customer intimacy along with scale is very critical, right? And that is what the scale insurgent is doing. Capital is super abundant. Talent is not, right? And most of the pieces that are getting created are intangible assets. It's based on IP, it's based on networks, it's based on geopolitics. So to be competitive, you have to win the war for talent. And to win the war for talent, there is the fundamental question saying that the incumbents, they have a certain operating model in place that is not allowing them to get talent, let them flourish. It's not allowing them to hire and mingle the same type. They look at a person and say that this is what a singular management model looks like. We will get everybody, train them in the same way, get them up a vertical ladder, go in towards general management and build out. Of course, over the last decade, you've seen dramatic changes to that. Large companies have changed significantly. What we believe moving from a ladder, vertical ladder, to what we like to call the passport model, which is to saying that go take a different job, get yourself stamped with that job, get yourself stamped with a different skill. When you come up for the next job, we'll see the stamps on your passport and we'll figure out whether you're eligible for this job or not. It doesn't matter. There is no vertical ladder. I mean, there is specialists that are coming up that look very different to each other who don't really want the general manager's job. They're very happy doing what they're doing. And that specific talent needs to be nurtured. The folks who are doing AI today or building out some of the large language models, they have no interest in being a CEO of the company. They want to do better large language models. The question is, can you retain them, build them, make them look like that, and make them succeed? So it is competitive tension. And on the other side of this is, from a geopolitical lens, if you look at the same thing of link through, there is offshoring. There is all of the combination of technology plus offshoring, and the fact that India and China are producing the labor workforce. The developed countries are not. I mean, they have lesser and lesser folks, a decelerating rate entering the workforce. There is an imbalance of where jobs will be created. Yes, there is a senior population which will require more frontline healthcare workers working there. There is a larger population here. They can develop a lot through technology, and I'll come to manufacturing in a second in terms of up for it. But offshoring plus technology is a very potent pool of saying that, yes, protectionism can be created, but you can create jobs around it in the countries where you can, and make that work in a fairly seamless way. I mean, GCCs in India already, India is almost half the GCC. We have 1.9 million jobs going fast in any way. So I think from a business standpoint, each of these are opportunities. It is about focusing on saying where it is the competitive advantage lie, and therefore which one do we focus on and build.
Absolutely, and you've touched upon very many interesting points, and we'll delve into that in just a bit from now. But Dr. Roy, let me come to you. Mr. Bisaria was actually speaking about right-wing governments across the world becoming very protectionist, and that is going to impact the job movement. But you do have a rightward focused government here in India as well. In fact, the Prime Minister in the United States just said that MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, Make India Great Again, equals mega. What kind of opportunities are you really seeing, from that perspective?
I have no idea.
And secondly,
I just have no idea what you're talking about.
And secondly, I also want to ask you about the skilling question, because, we often say that India has a great domestic dividend. Our demand has sustained, at least before Q2, on the back of our domestic dividend. But how can the government fill these skilling gaps? Because the government says that India is can be the talent capital of the world. So what does the government really need to do to nurture this? Because in the budget previously as well, there have been schemes that have been introduced towards skilling.
Well, you're sort of, what can I say? Oh, dear me. So in 2017, when I was the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, they said all this, skills gap, talent capital. So we were in a meeting, and then a very senior civil servant, a good man, but finally a civil servant said, we have to set up a ministry. I said, what? I said, how is that going to improve skills? He said, no, and then we'll have schemes. So this is not the default approach to everything in life. You have a problem, set up a ministry, appoint 5 joint secretaries, and then have schemes. The reason these are failing are, in fact, again, because we have not asked skills for what? It's a complex answer. But let me tell you that there is the answer to this partially is related to India's mega manufacturing failure. The share of manufacturing in GDP, and which is why I just loved our talk today, because, I mean, this is like a very rare experience for me. I'm actually, I'm a capitalist. I'm not a communist. I like people to do dhanda. Dhanda means what? You buy inputs, you sell them, you make profit. That is not how most of Indian capitalism works. It works on rent-seeking, land sales. Anyway, it's a longer story. And manufacturing is important for two reasons, which I hope you will appreciate, the women will appreciate here. Manufacturing is democratic. You cannot afford to be casteist beyond the point. You can do what Tirupur does, which is hire everybody from the same caste. But if you're not doing that, and if you're going to grow big, you cannot be casteist on the shop floor. You cannot be patriarchal or gender biased, anything biased on the shop floor. On the shop floor, everyone has to work together, otherwise it's like an airline cockpit. It doesn't work. This is the big learning from manufacturing. It improves the entire quality of investment and therefore of skilling. So if you want to skill, again you've got to ask, what are the activities that you want to create skills for? Let me give you two examples, and I'll just leave the examples with you. And then I want to make just one comment on what Ajay said. As I told you, I only worry about 80% of the Indian population, not the poor. The poor are useless in an economy. I worry about them, I feel bad for them. They're not consumers, they're not producers. That is why we want to reduce poverty. And we have reduced poverty now to 9%. So poor are out, you have to subsidize them. They're not actors, they're not players. Players are people who earn the per capita income above, twice the per capita income, 3 times the per capita income. Ask yourself, what are areas in which these guys, just like you and me, want to go to the market and buy something without subsidy? Without subsidy. No Awas Yojana, no Chhatra Chhaya, Bharat Sarkar, no departmental tinkering. They want to buy a square meal. Look at agriculture in India. It's totally subsidized. And I don't even know, even the farmer doesn't know how to make a profit. And the moment the poor chap tries to make a profit, you ban imports, you flood in exports. The whole strategy is not geared for agriculture to make money. You take textiles, I was discussing this with you, Anurag. India makes 3,000 rupee shirts. I know why we don't, because now I've done the research. We import 82% of shirts costing 300 rupees or less from abroad. And when I ask people, if you can make 3,000 rupee shirts, why aren't you getting the volume game? I got a very depressing answer, right? So, and it wasn't about skills. India could be slum-free in 5 years. The biggest impediment to that is lack of land, actually. But the biggest landowner in India is, anyone know?
Government of India.
The government of India. Okay? So solutions are sitting before you in plain sight. And all you have to then to do once you start those activities is create the demand for those skills, and the demand will be responded to. Just like, you know, when Mr. Agarwal started, he said engineers were in short supply, and then it boomed, right, in the 70s and 80s. So the whole issue of how will we create skills, et cetera, again goes back to that same question. Why are we not able to produce at affordable prices without subsidy the 5 things: education, health, one house in your lifetime, food, and 200 rupee shirts that a person earning twice or 3 times the per capita income wants? If we can take what Mr. Agarwal said and say, here's a market, let's go out there and produce these things, you will be prosperous. And AI, Chat GPT, Trump will not come in. With Trump, let me just conclude with a quick comment. I think Ajay gave a wonderful summary. The economists like trade-offs. There's a very simple trade-off here, any economist agrees. You do immigration control, you are going to make stuff like old age healthcare more expensive and many other things. The inflation tolerance of the West is what we have to watch. How tolerant will they be about buying things more expensively? Trump and whoever those characters are in Europe, they'll be able to subsidize them for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then it'll have to give. So we have 2 choices here in policy terms. We can do what we have very smartly done. We could Jack Daniels pe usko concession de and try and ride the storm out for 3 years till his own constituency bites him, right? Or we can go in there and say, okay, here we are proposing an architecture of tariff reform, keep him sort of, guessing, keep the Europeans guessing. So there are plenty of options in front of us, because the ultimate constraint to this anti-immigration policy will come from Europeans and Americans, not from Indians.
Right. And, to the point about manufacturing, you said that, manufacturing needs to increase as part of the GDP, but the government says, and of course, several industry leaders who we speak to, they say that, of course, government's PLI schemes have helped, right? So you have Apple, for instance, that is moving away from China, that's decoupling from China as part of its China +1 policy. They also say that they're going to increase the production in India by 25%. So that's going to reach 25% by the end of the year. They've So what do you think are the gaps, further gaps that the government of India really needs to fill when it comes to manufacturing, and what is your assessment of the PLI schemes?
I will answer that question very briefly. Our keynote speaker didn't get PLIs. Okay? Let's be very clear about one thing. A PLI is a subsidy. It's a subsidy, and it is all the things that Mr. Agarwal said we should not be in the business of, and unfortunately, Indian business has been for my own entire lifetime. Shortcut, jugaad, bypass. Why do we need to give a subsidy? Okay, you can say you need to give a subsidy because the government of India has failed. Hum khachar desh pe rehte hai. He has overcome all that. You know, it's a pretty bad country 30 years ago too. But in the end, you have to understand that if something only comes to your country with a subsidy, it's not sustainable unless you're able to improve productivity and get that business eventually without a subsidy. So do PLIs all you want, but don't celebrate them. They're admission of failure. And the sooner we get to a sunset clause out of PLIs, the better and more resilient and stronger we will be as a country. PLIs are a shortcut, you know, and it's okay. It's like taking, you know, exam jab lete the, at least when I was in college, I don't work so hard anymore. I used to take a pill, I can't remember the name. It would keep me awake and hype me up. I couldn't take that pill all my life, right? I had to have an exit strategy from it. Otherwise, I couldn't work in management. I mean, I wouldn't have had a career if I had spent my whole career popping a pill just to stay productive. You can do it for a while. Bacche ho, theek hai, exam pass kar lo. Uske baad kabhi na kabhi you have to be weaned off. And in India, these things have a bad habit of just staying on. I remember telling Mr. Jaitley when I worked in the finance ministry, you know, we did this corporate tax reform. And I said, sir, you understand one thing. Every single corporate tax reform you're proposing is related to two very powerful industrialists in this country, not Adani, Ambani and Tata, because you wanted people to invest in the power sector. So you said, chalo, bada khachar desh hai, aapko ek tax cut de deta hu. You know, so please, agar profit banaoge, somehow when you make power. If you look at all the things we did, telecoms, power, pharma, the only tax cut, and the only one we successfully cut, corporate tax cut we gave was for R&D, because firms are not doing R&D. So very often such subsidies, etc., are given because something is wrong in the system, and you're trying to do bypass surgery to overcome that. As Mr. Agarwal said, bypass surgery nahi chalta hai. Into everything like, you know, yugs.
Yes.
I mean, I can understand subsidies for 3 or 5 years. What is 20 years? I'm not even accountable. Whoever writes that note sheet, you know, whatever joint secretary is writing 20 years and giving all this, you know, moralizing, is going to be retired and living in Gurgaon. You know, and he's not going to be accountable for these 20-year subsidies. You know, you tell me something that's going to happen. It's like this irritating thing about 2047. I don't care about 2047. Tell me what our growth is going to be in 2027. So if you're saying that I can have an exit policy from a subsidy, I want to see what the blueprint is for a reduction in that subsidy between now and I'll be very generous, 2030. All these 15, 20-year Mahabharat, Kali Yuga arguments, I don't buy. Business is much more short-term than that.
So of course it's about, you know, tapering subsidies within a given period, a time frame.
No, ending them within a time frame.
Yes.
Announced time frame.
And Mr. Bisaria, let me ask you about, you talked about, you know, what's happening in the United States and of course other countries as well. What kind of jobs do you see getting concentrated in these geographies, and how do you really see that pan out?
Yeah, just to add to the PLI debate, you know, now we move to a concept of ELI. So we supplementing production-linked incentives with employment-linked incentives. So, you know, I would agree with what Rathin is saying, that, you know, all these are temporary fixes where you might just incentivize some short-term behavior, but it can't be a long-term fix. But, you know, on your question of what kind of jobs, eventually, even in the United States, you know, we've just entered Trump's world 1 month ago. And it's a very disruptive world, and surely there will be a correction because, you know, the economics is really voodoo economics, because it says that you make money from tariffs and then you give it to domestic producers who will suddenly start making autos in parts of America instead of importing them and so on. So I don't think too many economists are buying that argument, and too many businesses won't either. So I suspect that there will be an inflationary impact of these policies in the next 1 year. And part of Trump's promise or his mandate was to fix the price problem as well. So there will have to be a correction. And I think big tech and all the oligarchs will also lead that correction, because, you know, once you've done the optics and you've got rid of planes which shackled illegal immigrants for a while, you made the point to the base, then the real economic challenges would come. And I don't see the H-1B program going away. And I see an H-1B program of some kind, some form and shape coming into every Western country because they are all facing exactly these crises, and they would need people. In Germany a while ago, in fact, a couple of decades ago, they suddenly had a program saying Kinder Start Inder, which means let's teach our children about computers. We don't want these Indians in. But, they've turned around 180 degrees and they've come with exactly the same kind of programs. And what Anurag mentioned about GCCs, if you don't allow free movement of labor, talent, and high quality talent, that business will innovate and create 3,000 GCCs in India with that much business happening without having to move that labor. So I think there would be a correction. There is a shock, a disruption at this point, but there would be a correction. So young folks here who will be global talent, I don't think they will face the kind of barriers that are being talked about in the next 3 weeks, let's say.
All right. In fact, when you mentioned about inflation and reducing the cost of living, that was one of the promises of the Trump administration because he wants to make America great again. So let's see how that really pans out. But Anurag, coming to you, I mean, if we sort of crystal gaze into the future and to all the students who are sitting right here, what are some of the skills that they should focus on? And of course, while we talk about AI and a data-driven future wherein there's going to be quantum computing and of course, advanced tech, but what about those people who don't want to get into these spheres? Because not everybody can get into AI. So there's going to be that disparity always.
Absolutely, and there will be, I think, the plethora of skills and the kind of opportunities that are getting available. And to quote the same WF that you spoke about, right? So there is like 17% new jobs, 10% getting displaced, 7% new addition, right? Net about 170 million new jobs, 100 million getting cut, give or take 70 to 80 million left, right? Those 170 million new jobs and new skills that you see, it goes everywhere from, of course, tech and AI, all the way to designing backgrounds for games, right? So there is lots of creative stuff going, and there is a sort of diversity in the kind of new opportunities that is getting created for sure. And I think the key piece and especially for the folks in this room, management folks who are thinking about building this out, I think the only skill to really keep and think about is what I call ownership, right? Fundamentally, what businesses, whether it's you create your own, whether you work for a large other incumbent, is look for the ability to get it done, right? Whether you have to use 2 guys who know AI, 3 guys who know design, 2 advertisers, and 3 other people to get it together and get it done, you have to get it done, right? And if I take an example, years back, Tesla themselves, they tried to do this in their shop floor. They tried to replace with automation the entire workforce on the shop floor. They actually moved a fair number of people. Didn't work. Because they figured that somebody needs to tell the machine what to do and do better, and somebody needs to, process the process. And they said, who better than the folks who actually have been working them? So the question is that people who get into a job and get into a place, do the deep learning, understand what you build, understand how the connections work. And that is the piece of getting it done is about being able to understand the disparate connections. I mean, we are talking about agentic AI today, saying that one agent will speak to another agent, will speak to a 4th agent and get everything done. But the fact is, even knowing which are the agents to use is something that a human needs to do. So that fundamental skill of getting it done is very critical. In terms of absolute jobs and kind of skills, yes, there is. So nursing, frontline workers, I mean, healthcare, big one in other markets. In India, frontline will continue to grow dramatically, right? So you will see, with the consumption economy growing as it is, you will see a lot more frontline requirements, whether it's logistics, it's delivery, whether it's just customer care, multiple of those, even though a fair number of them will also get disrupted and replaced in a significant manner, right? And tech delivery and build out, creative will continue to rise as a significant piece. It is not all getting disrupted yet by AI. So there is pieces around that.
Right. Dr. Roy, let me talk to you about, one very important point, and that's about wages, right? I mean, because everybody wants to earn well. However, we've seen wage disparity increase over these past few years. In fact, this was also acknowledged by India's Chief Economic Advisor, V. Anantha Nageshwaran. He pointed towards that wage gap and also stated that corporate profits are at record high. In fact, they touched record high in 2024. However, it's corporates who are not really sort of improving wages of people, particularly who are in entry-level jobs, vis-a-vis, the people who are in top-level jobs. So how can the government of India really address this, wages issue, and how can corporates really then get into that as well?
I think the first thing, I had this discussion with Van, with the CA, after he said what he said. And I hear him and I feel his pain, but unfortunately I'm not a communist. It is not the job of an entrepreneur to pay higher wages. It is the job of the entrepreneur to pay a market wage. So what you want to ask is, why is the market wage constant over 7 years? If the economy is going, or hum Vishwa Guru ban rahe hain, or pata nahi kya kya ban rahe hain, then wages should be going up. And more important, why are wages constant and profits going up? That's a question I would ask as an economist. I'm not into telling people what they should do. They will do what they have to do. There's a difference, by the way, between an entrepreneur, today I was reminded of that by Mr. Agarwal's speech, and a profit maximizer. So if I only want to make money, what is the most common route? You're in FMS, I'm sure they'll tell you. What is the most common route to make money by? Why is money so special? Or Mr. Agarwal so special? You don't make money through earning profits, you make money through rents. Either you catch a license, or you make a monopoly, or you get a government contract and somebody else doesn't. And that's how a bunch of people make money. Musk also has made a lot of money that way. He grabs government contracts. So one big thing happened during COVID. Our output went down and profit rates went up. Then the entrepreneur became, very few of them are like Mr. Agarwal, became lazy. And he said, मैं काय को धंधा करूं? कम लोगों को hire करके, कम माल बेच के मैं ज़्यादा profit बनाऊंगा. That is the disease that has really afflicted India. That our profit rates are going up because many of our entrepreneurs have found ways in which to make more money by actually producing less. So we need to find out why that is happening, disincentivize it, and make sure that entrepreneurs get back into the business of producing more. And one thing I'm very happy the government did in this budget, it stopped nursemaiding the entrepreneur. Everyone said government of India should do capital expenditure. Last year, the finance secretary said very clearly, we've done it during COVID, this is the last year we are doing it. It is not the business of government of India. I'm not a communist again. It is not the business of the government of India to be in the investment business. It is the business of the private sector. So if they're not investing and they're still making more money, either we force them to make less, or make it contingent upon the investing more, or the situation will continue. Just by telling them, appealing to their sense of Victorian charity is not going to help, because they won't do it. So the reason why real wages are constant in India also is that what's the highest paying sector of an economy normally? I'm afraid it's not services. I mean, unless you join, at your FMS level. It's manufacturing. Manufacturing is where more people get a decent wage. Manufacturing wages in India are not just, manufacturing is declining, so there are less formal high wage opportunities across India. Those are also concentrated in a very limited geography, and this is going to cause a political problem in 10 years, where the minority of the population live, which is where I come from, the Indian Peninsula and Western India. That is the second problem. And the third problem is that after COVID, this is frightening, the proportion of people in India working on agriculture in that sector has increased for the first time in my life. Normally when countries grow and prosper, the people working in agriculture go down, they go to manufacturing and services. We have gone up from 37% to 47%. So all these things are keeping real wages low, because real wages are low in agriculture. That's why you're feeding 800 million people with subsidy. Manufacturing share is falling. And I'm afraid a lot of that, what is happening in services nowadays, unlike 10 years ago, is the creation of extremely low-end jobs. And also people are not being paid. You know that as well as I do. I mean, how is it possible that in India today, from a school like, when I know about IMA, I don't know about FMS, that last year 10 people were hired who will not pay income tax in the new regime, which means they were hired for 5-figure salaries. This is right at the top. So we have a crisis of structural proportions here. I hope I've outlined it to you. One, people have found out how to make more money by producing less, more profit. Therefore, they're hiring fewer people. Two, the two sectors which give you good money, high-end services and manufacturing, and of course exports, but we've never exported. I always call export something like what Mahatma Gandhi said about Western civilization. It would be a very good idea. But we've now not done it up to अगले 5 साल में करना है, करो. I'm 58 years old. We've been saying this from the age of 18. I mean, at scale like China or Vietnam, yeah? And those jobs are concentrated in a few geographies. And now this disease has spread across the wage spectrum. It's even hitting our top B schools. That wages are beginning to stagnate and people are not getting wage offers that you saw even 10 or 15 years ago. So it's a structural problem and we need to actually address it structurally. It's not going to work by telling people, oh, you should pay entry-level graduates more. They won't.
Right. And Mr. Bisaria, now, is there a fear of this becoming universal? Because like I said, that the governments are getting more protectionist. And secondly, I also want to ask you about, you have people like Elon Musk, business people like Elon Musk, prominently part of an administration now, of course, in the United States. Will that make companies that much more powerful? And how does that really then impact individuals?
Well, certainly, I think there is an argument that all of capitalism is oligarchy, or all current governments. So, you have exactly that debate going on in the United States, that the second most powerful person in the country is an oligarch who runs huge businesses. But, on the overall point of protectionism, let me cite the example of Canada, where I was High Commissioner till 2 years ago. They have 40 million people. They are a country with huge land. They have an ambition from becoming a major power from a minor power, a middle power, by 2100 AD. And they feel they'll become one when they get 100 million people. How do they get those? By migration. So, of course, I told them, if you're in a hurry to be a major power, we can send you 60 million people pretty much in a year. But right now, they are also drawing the protectionist barriers against immigration, because there's a correction going on. The rates, the rentals have gone up in cities. So people, although Canada was the most welcoming country in the world, for immigrants, they also are saying, rentals are too much. So pause, reflect, redo. So I think that is the overall sense, that pause, reflect, and Trump has been the catalyst for that in the entire Western world. So what the Canadians will do, they'll still give, instead of giving 400,000 PRs every year, of which 300,000 go to Indians, they would give 300,000 PRs, of which 250,000 will go to Indians. So they will continue to be, and they will continue to game the United States, because what our tech companies, for instance, are doing is a large number of them are setting shop in Canada, because their people are getting the visas and the PRs and servicing the North American market from Canada, and where the rentals are even cheaper. So people will game this, and then you'll find, the dominoes falling, because one country will suddenly find merit in getting more immigrants and playing the game, and then the other countries would have to follow suit.
Very valid point, Mr. Bisaria, you've made. Anurag, I want to also ask you about, are we going to witness a shift in skill-based hiring? How will that really play out in terms of, traditional degree-based hiring? How will that play out?
Absolutely. I think that is already playing out in a fair number of places. I think so let me answer that directly and then pick then manufacturing itself the piece to that. I think the direct answer is that in a size and nature of our economy and geography, we need a filter. Right? The challenge with skill-based hiring purely is that if you have 10,000 people applying for 20 jobs, how do you filter them out? You can't interview their skill, so there is a base level of somebody saying that, okay, show me your degree, that'll get you that 10,000 down to 500 or 1,000, and then within the 1,000 we look for skills and get to the 20 jobs people that we want, right? So there is the base level degrees continuing to remain important, because the filter is still very, very large. The top of the funnel is very significant. But if I take will the direction of travel move to skilling? Absolutely, and it is. And let me take a manufacturing example only, what Rathin was talking about earlier. So we are saying PLI based for new industries, building out semiconductors is something where, yes, action is happening. Electronics is a place where action is happening. Chemicals is a place where action is happening. But China Plus One gave so many opportunities over the last 4 years where potentially there is markets knocking on our doors every day saying, we don't want to buy from China, we want to buy from you, what can you give us? And textiles is a classic example. Fashion is a business which India has done for years and years and years. And that flow, if I can say, went from China Plus One to Bangladesh. When Bangladesh got filled up, went to Vietnam. When Vietnam got filled up, we got some too, right? But we had the opportunity to take that up and build that out in a manner. Now, question is that, yes, to build out some of this, to build out manufacturing, and the gentleman from Make in India equally put out a number of saying there is a 10 percentage point desire on manufacturing to go up to that place, which is sort of skills need to be made for that. And the way we are seeing it, the companies that will succeed in this will not be talent takers, they will be talent makers. They will have to make talent, they will have to spend time, effort, money on skilling, on building their own talent, on making sure that they get to that place. And that is, private capital. And today, if you look at, both sides of the sword, but if you look at capital, a large chunk of the small entrepreneur, the desire to make money faster than longer term, is also fueled by private equity. There is super abundant capital coming in from private equity. Private equity is telling somebody, hey, you were sleeping at the wheel so far. Even then, we can value you here, and this is what you can build. And there are 3 other guys who see this and say, this guy is getting valued like this. I want to get valued like this as well. What do I do to get valued like this? And the answer to that is not, let me create a great business that gets manufacturing and gets a 7-year answer. Private equity has a 5 to 7 year window that they want to go in and go out of. You need to make money in that time frame. And therefore, you need to find the things to do that. Look at the number of folks young entrepreneurs, insurgents, which entered the electronics, electricals, manufacturing space with very noble intentions of saying that we will use spare capacity of manufacturing, get that, multiple companies have that, give it to people and consumers who are building that through. They pivoted in 2 years, all, not name the companies, but 4 or 5 of them towards financing models. Because digital financing models are faster to return in terms of capital. The manufacturing went out of this. The piece of skilling, therefore, I come back to the piece of talent making, you will have to build them, and you will have to sort of grow them in-house and sort of build towards it. And there is simply no dearth of opportunity to do it. But yes, you will have to create and focus on the skill piece.
So since you're talking about private equity, what is that one piece of advice that you'll give to people over here in case they want to be entrepreneurs?
So I would say capital is super available. It will be super available for you as well. The question to think about is, if you want to get into something, get into it with a purpose, get into it, find the thing you love and find the purpose, create a business for longevity. Don't create a business to create money for 5 years and get out of it. More likely than not because of the fact that money is not great to make, more likely than not because 99.9% of times you will fail. If you want to succeed, build it for longevity, build it with a purpose. And there is no dearth of capital to back.
Right, and very well put, and this is something that we're seeing in startups of today as well. While there was a funding winter last year, but of course, the good startups built on solid basics have survived and have, become big companies. On that note, let me open the floor now to get in some questions from the audience, and if you could all raise your hands one by one, and we'll keep passing on the mic.
Somebody?
So.
Mike's being passed.
Was going to.
Who wants to get in first? Sure, please go ahead. Can you all please raise your hands? once again. Yes, you want to go? In the fourth row. Yes, please stand up. Yes. You.
So my name is Arjun, and there was a lot of talk about India missing the China Plus One train, especially in terms of clothes and garment manufacturing. Was it primarily because of skilling, or was it until the reform of land and labor laws, manufacturing just won't take off?
Roy wants to take that.
Percent of it, but let me answer your question in terms of a story, and it's not about China Plus One. It's about why we import 300 rupee shirts. I've been researching this for 5 years. So the 3,000 rupee shirt, please sit down. The 3,000 rupee shirts that we make successfully for, like the one I'm wearing, for Marks and Spencer and other hi-fi companies, these are made largely in 2 locations, South Gujarat and Tirupur. Okay, so I went to Tirupur and I went to South Gujarat. I speak some Gujarati and Sasural is Tamil Nadu, so the language is not an issue. I discovered interesting stuff in Tirupur, like everybody in one unit comes from the same caste. You never get away from this in India. Anyway, manufacturing unit, I thought they were very democratic, but they were all from one caste. So, I mean, the Tibetan ones, and that's important. So I asked them, I said, boss, why aren't you getting into volume business? There's money to be made here. You make 15%. They said, oh, our wage rates are too high. That's true. So I said, okay, no problem. Your wage rates, I'm not asking you to set up here. Go to the north. Jahan kuch hota nahi hai. Go to the vast Indian plain, which is like, stuck in eternity like some bad movie. Go to Bihar, Jharkhand, MP, take your pick. It's a large and dusty plain. And they were like, no, you see, they don't have the skills. I said, that's nonsense. 40% or 50% of your shop floor are Bongs and Bengalis and, Jharkhandis and UP walas and all that. So what, no skills? So then they said, and I said, I'm not asking you to go and live there. If there are various business models, you go better. Foster these guys as entrepreneurs. Go there and make some money. There's actually excellent connectivity now. And kafi khali hai. If you want to push your stuff out of, Jharkhand or Bihar through Diamond Harbour Port or through Digha Port, it's not a big deal. And anyway, I'm asking you to produce locally. So you will not be sending those shirts more than 30, 50, 100 kilometers initially. And let's create lots of those units. Then I won't tell you what they told me, but it hasn't happened. The answer was quite depressing. The answer had to do, very politely put, with the views of these industrialists sitting in the peninsula of the character and ability of people in the north to do business. And that is what they frankly told me. And they said, look at the governance there. It's happening because there's a difference in character. So we're willing to keep them here as migrant labor, but because we control them. But we're not willing to set up entrepreneurship there. Now you're all MBAs. This is a great case study for you to crack. We can make 300 rupee shirts. We have the skills. It's not a problem. You're looking at the wrong place. Lots of skills on those shop floors. We have the low wages. We have the population. We have the market. It's all in the same place. Jahan banaoge, wahi naukriyan hai, aur wahi bechoge. We can't do it. That's your answer.
Yeah. Rathin very eloquently answered, but I would say short answer. There is folks who are doing it here today. It's not. You don't have to wait for land and labor reform to get manufacturing off the ground. Simply not. There is, and if you look at, to me, chemicals is a great example that we're seeing right now. Specialty chemicals, some of these pieces, it is taking off the ground. There is share growing per year. There is industries that are flourishing and building in it. So there is definitely.
Let's take another question.
And just anecdotally to tell you, I was a salesman for the China Plus One story. When in Canada, going to different boards and saying there's a Canada Plus One opportunity, working along with Invest India. So there is some movement. It's not been as great as we thought. It won't be suddenly opening the floodgates because you're competing also with Vietnam, with Mexico, now with the United States, where Trump wants all business coming back. So what the boards tell you globally is, yes, interesting opportunity, but maybe you should have even deeper reform. And secondly, this ship takes a while to turn. So the China Plus One opportunity plays out in 5 years, not in 1 year.
So could I go next, please?
Go ahead.
Okay.
So my question would be to Dr. Roy. Barring a few top institutions, when we are talking about skilling, if you look at the education system, the state-based curriculum has not been able to build up talented or skilled individuals. And that is what you see, whether you see in the Gujarat diamond manufacturing industry, where they have to train their labor, or whether in services, Berger has to train the painters. So from a perspective, what do you think needs to be done? Even if the education is unsubsidized, we are not able to churn out really a good number of skilled people for the workforce to absorb.
You see, the trouble is that no one wants to be educated. Everyone wants jobs. For that, they need a credential. And you get the credential, and you get the job. You don't have to be educated. The top jobs in the public sector, you can have a BA in Sanskrit and get. Right? Just take the UPSC and crack it. 12th fail movie here. Right? Similarly, many of the other jobs that you get, and you see people who are successful at them, it is the credential that matters, not the skill. So at a larger level, I would say you need to change the mindset and ask parents like me, why they don't want their children to be educated. I am undertaking an experiment now with engineering colleges in Andhra Pradesh, when I'm actually teaching these guys humanities, economics, even English, just enough for them to get into the C-suite when they have used their engineering skills and done well. And there is hunger for that. It's also, by the way, not true that I don't know about Allahabad University, but at least in South India, the typical engineering college, typical medical college, baseline skills are being taught. What is not happening is they're not being embedded in an overall educational framework. What you're getting in FMS is actually an education. And that is why you're considered a solid institution. What you're getting in a cookie-cutter management school elsewhere in India is a credential. And that is not a solid education. That is the, I think, very important difference that people in India don't understand. I think the big tragedy is parents don't understand.
Let's go in for next. Yes, the gentleman at the back.
I'm happy to take that. I think, so by far gig is going to be critical. I completely agree with you, and in fact, some time back I was asking the question of saying, how come our demographic dividend has not yet already turned into a disaster? There is, we are ripe for a revolution, in my view, since roughly the last 18 years, where, in a place like that. Gig is, you see, which is where I think, to the question of skilling, the first thing speak my mind was this, to saying that as long as you have something of value to offer, there will be a buyer, right? There will be a taker, and that is what is true. And what today has happened is that while structurally there might be many issues, folks who have the skill, have the ability, are now being able to offer it on a gig basis. Technology is easing that. The structures of work are easing that. The structures of monetary systems and payouts are easing that. So as it gets more and more lubricated and more and more easier to be a mini entrepreneur of sorts, if I can, of offering your services in multiple ways, be a participant of the gig economy, it will be a very, very significant component of the growth of, of the employment answer. Because I don't see an employment answer coming from manufacturing, as Mathur rightly said. 5 years is the minimum that it will take to build some of this. It might take longer if we go in the right direction and keep building out. Services, there will be the play of high-end building out, low-end losing out to technology. So as you put out that and offering a lot of this, gig will play a very, very large role in the actual employment solution over the next decade.
Sir, you wanted to go.
Yeah, so my question is essentially, we're talking about skills, education, other things. What about building up the culture amongst the students, the society as such? We talk of Japan, we talk of other countries, and culture eats strategy for breakfast. So what's lacking in the culture that you mentioned, that people from South don't want to come to North India, people from China or they go to Vietnam or Bangladesh don't come to India? So what can we as a society do, and what's your take on that?
If I may just briefly answer that. I think it's very interesting. I think we are essentially a people who want to move to better and better geographies. Or औकात की बात है, 90%. I mean, Keralites get a chance to move to Dubai. But lately I've been noticing, you get damn good Onam food in London, where I live part of the year. And it's because there's a huge Keralite population. And the Keralite population has obviously come to London because it's a better place to live than Dubai. And people from UP and Bihar come to Kerala, unless you do the donkey route, because they don't have the skills to go somewhere else. So there is an acknowledgement, I think, in the country that there are nicer places to live and work. And if you look at social media, as I do sometimes, even younger, relatively affluent people are saying that, oh, let's go to Dubai and live, let's go to, I don't know, Slovenia or something, I can't remember, and do that sort of thing. That culture reflects, I think, something that we need to think about as a society. I can give you a couple of clues on what we need to think about, which are related to our constitution. See, it's very interesting. Students, it's very interesting. In the preamble to our constitution, we say that the state shall guarantee liberty and equality and shall endeavor to promote fraternity. Fraternity is not something the government can deliver to you. Fraternity we have to deliver to ourselves. And I'll give you one very interesting example of low fraternity which we have in India, which is our culture, and we have to change that. And that's why I'm a great fan of manufacturing, because I'm from Bombay. I saw how those shop floors brought about fraternity. Ek fraternity hota hai when you work on a shop floor. It should never happen in a gig economy or a service economy. Which is that I looked at the highest per capita income state in India, Kerala. 100% literacy, high human development. And I looked like UP, Khachad hai, Nepal se kam per capita income hai. Human development is like Burkina Faso, you know. There's one thing in common between these two states. People don't follow traffic rules. दोनों जगह पे लोग उल्टा स्कूटर चलाते हैं और दोनों जगह पे बगैर हेलमेट चलाते हैं. So obviously the simplistic explanation we give that, you know, therefore culture is important. That, oh, you know, when we develop and when we have more education, people will solve. They will not solve because the culture will not let them solve. So I think actually we need a national commission on fraternity. And God knows the politics of this country is not conducive to fraternity. I don't know what else is, but no, certainly not the politics.
Let's take the final two questions because we are completely running out of time. So,
just one observation, with specific reference to the jobless growth. I mean, the panelists have recommended that manufacturing would solve the problem of employment generations. So most of the organizations, today are planning for single-digit employee in a huge manufacturing plant, of course with the help of automations, etc. So I just want to understand how the manufacturing would solve the problem of employment generation.
I think it's been spoken about.
There's a multiplier. Multiplier in India is 14. Every manufacturing job created, especially in low, in relatively khachad locations. If you are bold enough to set up something in Jharkhand, as opposed to Tamil Nadu, that job itself creates 14 other jobs. Around, if the manufacturing is at high enough scale, etc., etc. So actually the indirect employment effect of manufacturing is well known, is very high.
All right, you wanted to ask.
Part of the corporate sector. And for 20 jobs in E&Y for a manager position, we have 3,000 CVs coming to us as a recruiter. And I take interviews and we choose 20 people. And all the 3,000 CVs are from Big Fours, BCG, Main, McKinsey. And they're all from good B schools. Forget about top 20. They're all top 20. I'm not even talking about, below top 20. We don't even look at below top 20. So it's a big, big issue which nobody's looking at. The second aspect is, which I would want to bring to attention, my father was a diplomat himself, 1976 IRS, to Mr. Ajay. Is it in the interest of politics to actually be, a developed economy, because, populist measures are always there. And today ex-government opposes it, but tomorrow the government proposes it. And 80% of the population, as Mr. Rathin, I didn't even know 80% is poor. I thought maybe 40% is poor. But he said 80%, which is huge. Less than $5 a day, right? That's what he said.
Less than $5 a day is not poor.
Yeah, okay.
Poor is $1.95.
Got it.
And that's only 9%.
Oh, I thought, okay, less than $5 is also poor for me. Being a senior manager in E&Y, I'll be very frank. Anurag can comment on that. He'll know the wages in the Big Fours and beyond that. So if 80% of the population survives on $5 a day, if all of them go to maybe, $100,000 a year, which if we divide by 365, are they all still going to vote? Are they going to care about the freebies? So yeah, it's a slightly longish question which is plaguing the economy. I have cousins who are from Muradabad. I have cousins who are from Lucknow. I have cousins all over. My father was from Allahabad University, 7 brothers. All this, only my father became a diplomat. All of them are from Allahabad University. They're all in different parts of UP. All the cousins are unemployed or they're working at 5,000 rupees a month. And they're very happy with that. And EY does not even look at them.
So what's essentially the question that you're asking?
Joblessness, this.
Okay.
And are we ever going to be a developed economy? Ever? I think we will
So
never be.
let me give you a non-cynical response. You know, what India's stated ambition now, official, otherwise now debated ambition, is to be a developed economy by 2047, and what that translates into is perhaps $30 trillion of GDP, $14,000 of per capita income. Is that possible? Mathematically, only if you have real GDP growth of about 9%. Do we have a historical parallel of that ever being attempted in the world? Yes. You had China do it for 3 decades from 1980 at close to double-digit growth. So it's been done before, but China lived in a different world. When its per capita, it had a different per capita. When it had that per capita income, it had global tailwinds. It benefited from globalization. It benefited from a set of policies. So it's a tough act, but I wouldn't share your cynicism that it's impossible. So, and you need to, as a country, grow with some ambition of where you want to be. And, it's a reasonable ambition to have, a reasonable ambition to sell, and at some point you start believing it, and maybe you even start working towards it.
Can I just add to that? India can be a developed country. It may not. So, what I suggest we do is we focus on the can and do it step by step. What I want to see is a majority of Indians leading more prosperous lives next year as compared to this year. Let's ask ourselves what we can do to do that. And for me, by the way, not a communist, prosperous lives by earning income just like you and me without subsidy. And if we can increase the number of people doing that, that's how countries have developed. First, the top, we've already been through that, Vijay Mallya times. Top 10, 15% of the country, we are rich. Italian kitchen, sab kuch hai aapke paas. Indigo pe fly karte. Now the next 15% have to become like them. Then the next 15%. Over 20 years, if we can have that virtuous cycle, then we will be a developed country. It's a no-brainer, it's arithmetic. But if we can't, and if we stall, and if we end up in what we call the middle income trap, like Brazil or Thailand or Philippines or countless countries and not China, then we will not be. The decision is in our hands, actually in yours.
And I would completely agree with that. And actually the fundamental point what I said, I don't think that, I don't take away, I'm a big India bull, and I by a mile don't believe that we don't have the opportunity or rather the ability to get to a developed nation. I think the opportunities are staring us in our face. The question is, and I would say this, as being the corporate participant of this panel, are more of saying that it is the private sector, the top 15% who have the income, who have the wealth, who have to think in the direction of purpose and nation building, along with making money. If they can do that, there is nothing stopping us. The opportunities are truly staring us in our face.
Yeah, I would like to, subsidies and all that we're talking about, and joblessness. I'm in trouble. It's the biggest challenge today to get people to work. Every Chhat holidays, 1/3 of the workers disappear. So our production suffers. So what are we talking about? The reality is this: people don't want to work. You ask the worker on phone, why are you not coming? He says, I get enough subsidies. I get local food, local this, and my marriage is subsidized, my food is subsidized, I get free ration. Why should I come all the way and work? So the real problem is there. The subsidies, as long as they last, people will not work. Jobs are there. I can offer 1,000 worker jobs today, but I don't have people. We train them, skill train them, and they go away. So that's the practical situation. Jobs are there, but people don't want to come and take them.
In fact, that was something that was also mentioned by the Supreme Court, last week itself about, people not wanting to work because there are subsidies. However, that can be debated, and that's a debatable topic, given the fact that we still, like one of the gentlemen here said, that we are still facing a jobless growth. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Hope you gained a lot of insights into the future of work and, enjoyed as much as we did putting it together for you.
A big thank you to our panelists for the engaging discussion. I believe we've discussed every sphere possible on this topic on what the future of workplace is going to look like. We started with AI and we discussed a lot of economics, and at the end we ended on the note of employment as a whole itself.